Good morning, Yuba Sutter. Welcome to this rainy morning. I'm with Andy and Mike, and we're going to have a conversation here a little bit about CalPERS. But before I jump into that, I've got a really awesome article to walk through. It's a really comprehensive discussion of the CalPERS problem, and it kind of it brings together, I think, just about every major issue that we've talked about over the past few months. So I thought we'd kind of walk through that as a nice summary and kind of highlight this amazing author. So, but before we do that, I was going to do a little segue from what you guys were talking about in the last hour, and specifically just give a little bit of a plug for a new financial literacy program in the Sutter County area. And I'm not certain of if whether Yuba County is participating or not, but the Jeloviches of River Valley Community Bank, they put together some seed capital for Junior Achievement Sacramento and brought Junior Achievement up into the Sutter County area. And now this is the third year I've been participating in it. We financial volunteers, people that are in the financial community, whether you're a CPA or you're a banker, etc., you can volunteer and you go through a little training, and then you're provided a packet, and you go out from second grade through senior in high school, and you teach for a 6-week program some aspect of financial literacy. The very first one I taught was all about entrepreneurship to our young people. So I've been doing that now, again, like I said, for 3 years at Berry Elementary. I've also been at Gray Avenue Middle School, and just really loving it. And I start at Gray Avenue again here in, I believe, February. So that was just a quick plug to say, Mike, there is some financial literacy coming to our young people through Junior Achievement of Sacramento now in our area. So that was just a quick, I thought, perfect plug since you were talking about young people and even balancing a checkbook. That's something we teach, right? So simple nuts and bolts kind of financial understanding.
When I went to school, they didn't teach that because it was common practice for you to actually listen to your parents and actually see what they did. And we didn't have the taxes that you have right now, because when growing up in the 50s, Social Security wasn't a big deal. Health insurance was not a big deal. The taxes that you paid, were small in comparison to what you're paying. The biggest problem we've had is the 70s and 80s when you had to actually have two people working to have any kind of life,
You know what the tax rate was in 1913, the first year of our current income tax code?
No.
The highest
2%.
The highest marginal tax rate was only 7%.
Yeah. It started
Wow.
at 2.
Yeah, something about that's about the range, 2 to 7. So pretty crazy. Now it's 39.6, right? And that's just the federal number. There's other adders to it that depending on the kind of income and stuff. I used to do that. So.
Your Social Security is 7% now.
That's right. But if you take them all up, and in California, if you take them all up and add them, and add every subtax there is that happens to everybody there is, we're over 68% right now.
Sure. No, absolutely. I've been saying that for years. It's egregious, and it's really unfortunate for such a developed country to have such a egregious tax rate. And we're not a socialist society yet we have a tax rate that mimics socialism type societies such as Sweden. So anyway. Moving on, a couple of more quick announcements. Trees and Traditions. I just wanted to mention that the museum holds its annual Trees and Traditions gala, and it's going to be on December the 2nd, 2017, from 5 to 8 p.m. $45 per person, includes champagne and some fantastic hors d'oeuvres. I've been going to that every year and for the past many years, and great job, Jessica, at the museum for putting that on. One last thing, Sutter Butte's Tea Party. I'll be speaking to you Monday night, 6:30 at Glad Tidings. Look forward to that. And going to give you a public service announcement from CalPERS. So new scam targets CalPERS retirees. Watch out, CalPERS retirees. This is from October 31st. No, I'm making mistakes all over the place. November 2nd, I'm sorry. So just basically, I just want to point out to you that a phone call appears to come from the state's largest pension fund, CalPERS, but it's not. It's actually a scam artist. and they tell retirees that they have to send money through prepaid credit cards, blah blah, in order to receive their pensions. And it may appear legitimate. I mean, we're all used to these nowadays. We get the emails that appear to be our bankers, et cetera. But I just wanted to bring that out to light a little bit, especially for anybody who's older and maybe just a little bit less aware of some of these scam artists that they're out there. So make sure that they can provide you certain kinds of information because they don't have it. They don't have your personal information. So if they can't provide it to you, hang up the phone.
So the Pakistani accent wouldn't be a tip-off?
That might clue you in.
Hello?
But then again, CalPERS could just be outsourcing. So, it's unknown. Okay, so that's my public service announcement for the day. One last thing I wanted to mention that this week I received a really awesome letter. This is a letter from Betty Yee, our state controller, and she has appointed me to the Advisory Committee on County Accounting Procedures. So I'll be on that. It's a 10-member.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's a 10-member committee, 5 auditor controllers around the state, 3 CAOs, and 2 supervisors. So I'm really excited to be on that committee, and I look forward to helping, set accounting procedures.
I think you'll be a burr under the saddle. We need that more often in government, especially now with California as deep as it's going in the hole.
Well, Andy, that's a great final segue into my little announcement things. I wanted to mention that, look, I'm definitely taking heat for some of the things that I say on here and elsewhere, but I want you all to know that truth will prevail, and the political pressure will not change my behavior. I have an interest in transparency and in appropriate government, both size, scope, transactionally, what it is they have an interest in. And so I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to say what I say. And if I take hits politically, then so be it. I'll go back to the private sector. But I want you all to know that I'm here to serve you, and the political pressure it won't change me. So now back to the show for the day as far as CalPERS. So this is a rather interesting article, as I was alluding to earlier, from Zero Hedge. And the gentleman calls himself Tyler Durden. And if you're a Fight Club fan, the movie Fight Club, you'll get the reference. So this is from a while back, but it is so fantastic. It's September 14th, 2017. And if you care, at 4:06 p.m. So this Tyler Durden succinctly sets forth what I've been talking about over a number of shows, but I'm going to jump in right quickly to some of the craziness that's brewing. And this in no way is a way to scare people or anything like that. This is what I perceive to be a Paul Revere ringing the bell sort of situation, a very appropriate, hey, we need to look at this. So we've talked about previously that 2 employers have bankrupted their pension plans, wherein they have cut the retiree beneficiaries. They cut their retirement payments by some 60 to 63%, and then 60% was City of Loyalton, and then San Gabriel Valley. And it's an Health and Human Services consortium of 170 employees or retirees. They also cut, and they cut 63%. So we think of these pensions as these promises for a specific defined benefit plan, a specific amount of money that you're going to get every year until you pass, that kind of thing, and that it's guaranteed. Well, not always, and not necessarily. And that's really important for you pensioners and or public employees to know. Because when I speak about this on the radio and then I'm told by others in the county, hey, you're really upsetting people, or they're concerned that, the county's going to get rid of the pension and maybe they should go elsewhere. Well, Sacramento and jobs down there are looking a lot more exciting because Sutter County is, talking about pension reform and stuff. Well, first of all, I'm just the auditor controller. I'm not a supervisor. I'm just talking about numbers and finance. But second of all, I think you need to step back and take a look at the situation and maybe stop shooting the messenger and maybe just consider that the financial predicament that we're in is that bad. It actually is. And it's not to say that we can't get out of it, but unless you address it. So the first, like a Star Wars thing, the first, way to better yourself is acknowledgement, right? Is acknowledging the problem. We've got to acknowledge the problem. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about two more jurisdictions, Trinity County Waterworks and Reading and Neyland Sanitary District. These are the next two on the rise that may have somewhere between. I mean, they're saying 70 to 90% cuts to these pension programs. They're that poorly set at this point. So here is just a wonderful quotation from the article. So, and man, there is just an awesome graph too in this article, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, about our funding status. CalPERS certainly deserves a healthy portion of the blame here, as they've been willing participants in perpetuating one of the largest public pension Ponzi schemes in the country for years now. Just last December, we noted CalPERS' decision to only modestly decrease their discount rate by 50 basis points. So that means that we're going to go from 7.5% to 7%. That's 50 basis points, 0.5%. And that is a move which their finance committee chairman all but admitted was politically motivated. And then to finish, to allow municipalities and other government agencies some breathing room. What do you mean politically motivated? You're reducing the discount rate, which has the immediate impact of increasing the amount of money you're going to require that the CalPERS employers pay up. So that is Sutter County, with the drop in discount from 7.5% to 7%. Down in Sacramento, that necessarily means that we, the taxpayers, through our contributions to CalPERS, have to pay in more. And so, if we're going to be paying in more, that's a good thing, right? Because that puts more money at CalPERS and then more money in the market. That money then develops a rate of return and grows. That's the idea. That's the concept.
Only if it's managed properly.
Of course.
The political decision you just mentioned was basis on the political, and then the problem is their investments are political also, like de-investing from things that are now growing.
That's right. That's right. And so here's what the author's point is, though, as far as it being politically motivated, as described by the chairman of the finance committee. What he's saying is your own outside consultants, which you paid good money to evaluate, they say 6% is the proper discount rate, a much greater drop, 150 basis points, not 50. And CalPERS, here's the politics, they said, well, if we drop it 150 basis points down to 6%, that's going to balloon the debts so high that the employers, they couldn't keep up with the growth in the contributions, meaning each county and city would have to put in so much more money now and over the next few years because of this discount rate drop that it possibly could bankrupt jurisdictions.
So it's boiling a frog is what it is. And they didn't they just come out and say 7 years we're going to increase the rates?
I didn't see that, but over the next 4 more years or 3 more years, it's going to continue to decrease. And it's a slow
but
walk.
That's an increase in payments.
That's right. Yes.
A decrease is an increase. Only in the government does this.
That means vote yes. It means no.
Right. Well, that's the way they're inversely related. The discount rate and the contributions required. So moving on. In 2011, CalPERS was 83% funded. And in 2016, 68% funded. So what happened over the last 5.5 years, 6 years, to take us from over 80 to below 70? Because I thought that we had a fairly strong market. I'm not saying that the last 5 years was perfect, but we have been growing away from the 2008 bottom, maybe with some small dips here and there. Although for everybody out there, especially during the Obama administration, it really drove me crazy when they kept talking about the U1 number, and that's unemployment and underemployed, and it includes folks that chose to walk away from employment. The U6 number is always a better number to use. The U6 number, it takes those out, and it's just the core unemployed. excuse me, it doesn't. It includes those. So I said that opposite. Excuse me. So what would happen is the Obama administration would say, "Oh, well, unemployment's only 7% and it's dropping." And I would say, but if you include the other categories that the U6 number has, it's actually over 10%. So the point being is the market over the last few years hasn't been horrible. It's actually been in a growth mode, but at the same time, it hasn't been as strong as the early 2000s. So
you ask what happened at that point.
Please.
2 words: Common Core.
Ooh.
Common Core math, and now the Common Core math is set home with CalPERS, and they're doing fantasy math now.
Well, what this necessarily means, okay, is what happens when we're talking about a 7.5% discount rate or a 7% discount rate? You say, Nate, stop talking about all of that. What does that
Nate,
really matter?
Stop talking about all that.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Well, actually, it's worse than needing to achieve 7% rate of return each year. Why do you say that, Nate? Well, as we've talked about before, if you're not 100% funded in the market, if you're 68% funded, you have to obtain a yield that's significantly greater than your assumed discount rate because you don't have as much cash invested in the market as you are supposed to. And so we talked about the 11.2% return this past year, was actually more like 7.62%, just basically treading water on their discount rate. But they'll say 11.2 as though it's something much greater than it is. So the point of this and the repetition of describing this to you all is to say that we have to really climb out of this with some of the most incredible market returns ever. So we can't just hit 6%, 7%. We have to achieve something much greater than that because of our funded status. And the likelihood of that, if you look at the probabilities that investment folks use when they're looking into the future and trying to anticipate what's going to happen, they assign probabilities to the various rates of return that the overall market will get, certain segments of the market, et cetera, and the probability of the returns that we need to get out of this on a return basis alone, meaning not with basically new taxes or much greater contributions from the people, is very low probability.
You mean intelligence management, making decisions, putting the money where it belongs. Like if we would have taken the money from CalPERS and put it into Apple stock, look what it just did, and then pulled it out, just like a day trader, we'd actually be flush, and you could change the rates by that manner. But this would take forward looking and not status quo. And unfortunately, it's not the politicians; it's the bureaucrats in between.
That's right. Well, bureaucrats in between. Another quotation from the article. Of course, as mentioned above, these pension cuts will impact a tiny number of retirees. But that is all the more telling, as elected officials are only willing to admit their Ponzi schemes in instances where the political carnage can be managed. Certainly a handful of people here and there are expendable. So I'm not trying to incite anything. I'm trying to describe the severity of the situation here. We now have 4 examples, 2 that are coming, 2 that have already come, of actual cuts to entire pension systems, an entire employer's pension system, 170 employees or previous employees at San Gabriel. This is here, and it's these are not outliers that will always remain outliers. I believe they're just they're on the cusp. They're first.
All right. Would organizations that are not government who do this same thing to their investors, would they go to jail?
Well, that's why the gentleman uses Ponzi as the term, because that's what he is can't come to conclude that it is, and Ponzi is in fact an illegal act. So where you're taking new money from investors or new investors and you're paying old investors with that same money. You can't do that. That's the capital that they're investing, that needs to go into the business. But if the Bernie Madoff of the world is just taking that new money, that new equity capital, and simply paying it as dividends to the existing and old shareholders, Ponzi scheme.
It's much like the contractor comes to your house to fix something. You give him a deposit that he's not supposed to get, and he uses it to pay off to get the other job funded. That's against the law.
Sure, there you go. That's a great example.
And it's the way it's handing it hand over here to hand over there.
Isn't that the whole budget for California, though, working that way.
It's vaporware.
Well, I would say that that's what's happening exactly in our Social Security situation, because folks that are currently retired or retiring real soon, your Social Security payments that you receive in retirement, those are being funded almost entirely by current employees, people that are currently contributing to the system. That is to say that the money that was put in previously by those retirees, those folks that are currently retired, has already been spent. And so because it's been spent and it was taken, we've talked about this before, during the Johnson, they began it during Lyndon Johnson in the 60s. It became, it's a complex issue, but they basically started putting IOUs in it and spending it in the general fund, the cash. So it's a scary situation, and that is the epitome of a Ponzi scheme, Andy.
I'll stay out of it. Hate for you to lose your place here.
No, that's all good. So let's talk about the whole shebang, everything all together. So back to the article. We decided to take a look at what would happen if all federal, state, and local pension plans decided to heed the advice of Mr. Gross. As one might suspect, the results are not pleasant. We conservatively assume that public pensions are currently $2 trillion underfunded. That is $4.5 trillion of assets and $6.5 trillion of liabilities. Even though we've seen estimates that suggest $3.5 trillion or more might be appropriate. Trying to not get too bogged down in the numbers here, folks, but at the same time, I do need to read through them a little bit, and then we'll try to digest it.
You're the auditor controller. That's your nature is numbers.
Oh, and I do get bogged down in them. So anyway, continuing on. We then adjusted the return on asset assumption down from 7.5% used by most pensions to the 4.0% suggested by Mr. Gross, and found that true public pension underfunding could be closer to $5.5 trillion. Or over 2.5 times more than the current estimates. Others have suggested that returns should be closer to risk-free rates, which would imply an even more draconian $8.4 trillion underfunded status. So the point being is pretty much no matter what discount rate we're going to use, whether it's CalPERS' rate, the rate that their consultants told them to use, or the rate that Mr. Durden is describing here in this article, 4%, all of them produce what the chairman back in 2001 or 1999 described as the catastrophic example, or the catastrophic option, when the actuary at the time, the chief actuary, was describing, here's the worst case scenario, here's the likely scenario, and here's the best case. Well, we got the worst case.
So you're saying, in a nutshell, that the whole public retirement system is headed down on a 45-degree angle, and we're in a plane altogether. And we're headed down, and we don't have any way to pull it out without some kind of miracle?
Well, because I can't see the future, and I don't know how the markets are going to go. I don't know how the geopolitical situation will all move, and the greater macroeconomy. It's impossible to say, but what I can say is the only way we can go out of it from a logic standpoint, from a reason standpoint, is by addressing it, is by sufficiently, appropriately addressing it in a way just like it's your family, it's your home, it's your own budget. And it looks like we're coming up on commercial.
Yeah, we're gonna give you a break, Nate.
And we're back. We're back. So we're going to start with the summary overall thesis of this article. I just love it. So, Tyler Durden. This is from Zero Hedge, and this was published on 9/14/2017. While we've yet to experience any large municipal pension failures, which is just a matter of when rather than if, the small pension failures sprinkled across the state of California are starting to pile up. As the Sacramento Bee points out today, September 14th, public workers in Trinity and Imperial counties are just the latest to have their pensions slashed by up to 90%. So let me be clear, these are not the counties themselves. These are sub-governmental agencies within these counties. I just got to be clear on that.
Yeah, but that's a distinction that the leaders of CalPERS have established. I mean, we think of the county. We think the county is all these departments, and yet we have people that can be cut off and isolated.
That's right.
And that's illegal.
Yes.
Well,
yes. Special districts.
immoral.
Special districts have been the ones taking the hits early, other than the city of Loyalton. Very, very true. So continuing on. So let me repeat that. Public workers in Trinity and Imperial counties are just the latest to have their pension slashed by up to 90%, as their cities admit what most of us have known for some time, namely that they're running Ponzi schemes which simply don't have the funding required to pay out the benefits they've promised. 90%, folks. That is enormous. If you have been working for an agency for 30 years, banking that retirement, and then you get into retirement and you find that your retirement is going to be cut by 90% or 63% or 60%, that is so immoral. That person has been assuming and knowing that would be there. They've been promised it. The boards have promised it.
Well, what frustrates me is I've had some people that I won't name, but they said, I'm out of this thing in 2, 3, 5 years. And as long as I can get out of it, okay, guess what? You can run, but you can't hide. It could come and get you. And I certainly hope that it does in certain places, because they knew it was not sustainable. They knew. And how many generations have gone through that process, and they knew that it was happening, but they didn't say anything because they wanted to be politically correct.
Right. Agree 100%. So Trinity County Waterworks District 1, west of Reading, and Neyland Sanitary District from Imperial County, they're in line to become third and fourth government agencies to have their retirees cut. So this is a scary situation, but it's one that can be addressed, needs to be addressed. We just need to have the fortitude and the willingness to do that. So to fully fund their workers' pensions, the two districts would have to muster up hefty termination fees. We've talked about this before. This is where the termination fees, what they call termination fees, I don't even think that that's the right way to call it. But nevertheless, what it is simply is that they move the money that you've put in with CalPERS, they move it over to what's called a termination pool. And that pool is a risk-free pool, meaning they take your money and they invest it basically in treasuries, federal treasuries, which most everybody around the world consider to be risk-free. That is, that the United States will never default on its debt, so there is no risk of default. Therefore, it'll only get you a very small rate of return because there's basically no risk, backed by the full faith and credit of the taxpayers. So the terminated agency pool, this risk-free, when you move the money into that very low-risk pool, obtaining a 1 or 2% rate of return, that becomes the new discount rate. So not 7, not 6, not even 4, 1 or 2. And they use 2% as their assumed rate of return. And so what that does is it means all your future investment earnings, instead of being 7%, they're now only 2%. So that means all of the money that you are no longer making because you're not employed in the greater market, then that money has to come necessarily from somewhere, and the only place is greater contributions from the jurisdiction, the taxpayers, basically.
Marysville had posted a story in the paper that they're going to be discussing this. What do you think of that?
Yes,
begin with they're bankrupt anyhow, so I'm not too sure exactly how they're going to do that.
Well, they definitely have some challenges over there. I've actually reached out to a city council person, and we're going to continue the conversation about CalPERS and about options. But my understanding from their meeting with a CalPERS attorney about a week ago Wednesday was that they decided that closing was definitely out of the options right now. Until statutory change comes from Sacramento, you can't close the plan very successfully. You have to cut retiree benefits if you do.
Yeah.
So I think they're still in a holding pattern there. But the fantastic thing about it, and what I so appreciate as a constituent next door, or a resident next door in Sutter County, is that Marysville's stepping up and having the conversation, and their willingness just to even talk about it, I think is amazing. So I do appreciate that, as a Sutter County resident, anyway. So, as you, this is back to the article. I want to just recap this. It's very important, I think. As you may recall, last October, we wrote that the unfortunate situation in Loyalton, California, whereby CalPERS was threatening to slash pension payments to a group of retired city workers after their city council members failed to understand basic pension accounting and the unintended consequences of terminating their plan. See pension benefits in tiny California. That was followed by retirees of the East San Gabriel Valley Human Services Consortium getting similar cuts after their former municipal employer failed to pay their pension dues. So, government, just so you all are aware out there, if it gets in a predicament where the expenses related to the government's operations, when they become so great, the government can only do one of two things, in my mind. Or perhaps I could do one of three if I was really trying. But it's either cut expenditures somewhere, right, to balance, because the revenue in a government organization is generally static, or it's at least you can't grow it like you can in the private sector, generally speaking, unless option number two, you raise taxes. So cut expenditures or raise taxes, or number three, I was going to try is change the rules by going to Sacramento and getting statutory change.
Well, that's one of the options you do have because if you think about it, the government produces nothing. Okay, it only takes and utilizes it. And when you're talking about the CalPERS dilemma, one of the problems is we're starting with taxpayers' money to begin with, and now we're going to require more taxpayers' money coming out, going towards this illustrious Ponzi scheme, as you explained.
Right. When does it end?
Well,
and where does it end?
It's just the opposite of what we were talking about earlier. It's sometimes when you're in a nosedive and if you're flying a plane, Andy, you could tell us what happens. If you're flying a plane and it's in a nosedive, the only way to get out of it is
the flat spin is you go the opposite direction of what your body is telling you, and that's why some pilots hit the high mountains.
That's right, because you actually, if you're in a flat spin or a dive, you need to push down to regain control.
Yeah.
Well, so I do appreciate the pilot's lesson, and I appreciate though the aspect that your intuition is the exact opposite of what's the necessary thing to do here. So that's a pretty interesting comment. Another just a kind of a final comment from a gal who was interviewed. And she is at East San Gabriel Valley Human Services Consortium. Quote, "We were always told that it was set in stone." And they're just talking about the pension. "Now to find out that's not true. Is the sky blue? Is water wet?" End quote. Lynch, who lives in a 1994 motorhome, said of her pension. Quote, "We've paid 100% of our responsibility into it. I just don't understand how they can come along and cut so much out." End quote. So that's a sad story, and I wanted to mention it because this is real. This is happening. This gal is a fellow Californian, just in the southern part of our state. This is happening. Loyalton is a mere 70 miles from where we're sitting, 60 miles from where we're sitting. This stuff is here. So let's talk about it. Let's figure it out, and let's do it with sober eyes.
Well, the biggest problem they had was when they unionized the workers, and then when they set up CalPERS itself, it just was not sustainable from the beginning. And in the 70s, we had people who used to work, work in insulation in the private sector in the 70s in Sacramento, and you had a lot of people who worked there, and the government pay was not quite as good as the outsourced outside pay because of the stability of those payments. And what they did is they said, well, people outside are making more money than we are, and they voted themselves raises. And I think the The demise of the democracy was predicted back when the Constitution was written, in that once they find out they can vote themselves raises, it's the end of democracy as we know it. And that's how you end up with people making more money as CEOs than, yeah. Anyhow, is that pretty much on the head?
It's close. It's close because one of the things I really noticed, if you talk about the whole thing, is the inflation based on, well, their feelings. You know, people can live by two things. People can live by ego, or they can live by principles. The people that live by principles are the people who will stand up and become accountable for themselves, and they're the ones that, you know, that's not going to be so distraught at Nate for being the bell ringer of the truth. Because what it is if when we bring that forward, nobody wants to talk about the truth, and you know, it's all based on it's cognitive dissidence is what it's all about.
I've noticed a change in the attitude of the people, young people. But for me, I'm 70, so young people is anywhere from 60 on down.
Thanks.
And you have a breakdown of morals and ethics, and they knew that this was not really realistic, but it's the attitude of I got mine. Now you hang on to yours, and they seem to think that we're going to pay whatever they ask. So we're going to work harder so we can pay the government, and I think there's going to be an armed revolt at some point.
And that's even if we can still pay. That is to say, if we even have the wherewithal to do it, you know, the longer we delay the pain, the greater the pain becomes. So I don't even know if that option will be available when we finally get to addressing it sufficiently. Of course, I pray that doesn't happen, and that we get at it. So, you know, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm discussing this with you guys in the morning. So maybe just to finish up with one last tidbit from this article. Quote, of course, okay, let me set this up. So now they're talking about the lack of appropriate discount rate settings. So instead of going from 7.5% to 6%, like the outside consultants that they paid good money to do described or recommended to CalPERS said, hey, we appreciate your 6%, but no thank you. We're going to do 7% because 6% would be too much for our employers, you know, Sutter County, et cetera. So with that, here's where we go. Quote, of course, this decision should come as little surprise to our readers, as we concluded in our previous post with the following prediction. We've seen this battle between math and logic and politicians played out numerous times in states all across the country. Somehow we suspect that math, logic, will continue to lose. Better to bury your head in the sand for a couple more years and pretend there is no problem. Meanwhile, Richard Costigan, chairman of the CalPERS Finance Committee, who owed that, quote, this is just a start, end quote, more or less admits that the decision was politically motivated to allow, quote, municipalities and other government agencies some breathing room before they absorb the impact, end quote. So, you know, plenty of people are ringing the bell.
Kick the can down the road.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? You
Exactly.
know,
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
But the people left holding the bag are not my age. The people left holding the bag have yet to be born. And, you know, that you're going to catch it, and we're enslaving our grandchildren for generations, and yet we're still not addressing the issue. And this. You're not the first person to say anything about this, and you're not the
Won't be the
earliest
last, sure. Yeah, no.
You know, and it's unfortunate that we don't have the political will to do what's actually necessary to be able to recover from this. We fought wars, and we're still fighting a war.
We may have that political will, but it's a matter of the red pill or blue pill. I mean, do we want to continue on status quo? Because status quo is our enemy. Right now.
Well, what I think is exciting is that, one, we're having this conversation. Marysville's having the conversation. We have examples now of defaults across the state that are both have happened, that are coming. Those are not exciting or happy or healthy, but what they are good for is providing credibility to those ringing the bell to say this is happening. So if we just continue the conversation, if one jurisdiction, one county, one city, if they do something amazing on this, such as City of San Diego, when they 5 years ago decided to no longer offer pensions to new employees, they only offered a 401k type plan, and a county match on top, or a city match on top of that, an employer match. That was a neat first step for them. And we also talked previously about it was the UC system, I think. They had also done the same thing in allowing their employees. Some 30% of the new hires since they made this change have adopted the 401k style.
Is it something you can do partially? Can you say all new hires from now can go?
No.
It's all or nothing.
Not if you're CalPERS. City of San Diego that did it, they're on their own system. Okay. So that's why they were able to make that change. And that's why I continually state we've got to get a legislative fix here. And SB 681, I believe, was the number from earlier this year, February 15th, 2017, by Senator Morlock from Orange County. He put the first bill that I've seen that actually tried to get rid of these, quote, termination fees, i.e., instead of moving our money into a risk-free pool, leave it with the market and don't make us pay this enormous termination fee because you're going to move it into a very risk-free, low-yield pool.
Without being politically incorrect, it's the chicken fund. It's like, oh, you're going to stop paying us, so we're going to move it over here to the zero hedge. You're not going to move anything. When we actually need people in CalPERS to take the biggest chunk and go to the most dramatic extreme they can to fund the fund the ongoing returns.
Right.
If they went back to tobacco, I mean, talk about pompous asses. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Is that legal on the radio?
Yes.
Don't care. But anyhow, what gives them the right to do that? Morally and ethically, they're just we know what you are. We're just determining the price.
I'm surprised they're not investing in the NFL right now because it's declining so fast.
If what we were talking about was, for example, let's just say the Senate and the Assembly in Sacramento, let's say that they were the guardians of the PERS pension program. If they chose to not invest in the apartheid state of South Africa in 1986, or they chose to divest from coal stocks, tobacco stocks, you name it, that's a political decision, and one that group, that wouldn't be surprising. They're political. But for that politics to bleed over into the appropriate body that is governing the pension fund, the CalPERS board, for those politics that the Sacramento lawmakers have to bleed over into the chairman and the other board members of that CalPERS board who have a fiduciary responsibility to hundreds of thousands of taxpayers in this state, millions of taxpayers, hundreds of thousands of retirees. It's so egregious. In other words, not only are they hurting and slamming the retirees because they're risking the solvency of the fund, but second, they're saying that if it doesn't work out, it's all backed by the taxpayers of California. So it's a double whammy. We don't care that the taxpayers are on the hook for this, and number two, we don't care that the retirees are possibly going to lose their pension up to 90%.
Could you imagine if Governor Brown said, I'm going to do the right thing, and instead of working with the choo-choo, I'm going to take all those funds and I'm going to address the CalPERS problem, and I'll leave the legacy of having solved the biggest problem in California that has ever been. I mean, it's almost as big as what his dad did.
Right. You know what? I would say thank you, obviously, to Governor Brown. Should he ever do that?
Jerry, you listening?
Yeah. That's the same thing I kind of say over in Sutter County. The two low-hanging fruit for ways to spend our money are to address the pension issue and to address facilities. Facilities are investment in your infrastructure, right? And it's a way to reduce pretty egregious expenditures. The same goes for the state. Their two low-hanging fruit is not the bullet train, obviously. It's not about transportation. It's about water and pension. Yeah. So invest in our water so that we can continue the economic engine that is our ag community in the Central Valley, or address the low-hanging fruit of the pension because it is an enormous benefit if you address it now.
But it's not a warm and fuzzy type of thing. 'Cause
Nope.
That's where all the decisions seem to be made. Go to the warm and fuzzy, make people happy with these decisions that are just insane.
Well, I'm going to look into getting a letter to Brown on doing that, because if you continue to pour money into the train, we're all going to. It's just going right off the cliff.
Yep.
We'll go off the cliff in a train. At 250 miles an hour, however fast he thinks that thing's going to roll.
Actually, not very many people will go off because you can only get so many people on the train at a time.
Oh, sure, right.
Unfortunately, it's the entire state of California. So, all right. I think we've got some other things that I wanted to bring up. One was the packing party, November 4th, and you had a festivity that's happening this Saturday, November 4th, which is today at the American Legion VFW 948 at 1703 Elm Street. That's right before to the Scarred Bridge, before the high school on going out of Marysville. Tri-County Blue Star Moms, call Nancy at 632-8531. I think they're already over there getting ready for it. But you have a thing that I didn't get the date, so that's why I'm asking
Annual
for it.
Gala, Trees and Traditions at the Sutter County Memorial Museum, Saturday, December 2nd, 2017, from 5 to 8 p.m., $45 per person, champagne, hors d'oeuvres, and great people. And great exhibits and other awesome things to look at and to learn about.
Do you have a phone number for that?
530-822-7141 or SutterCountyMuseum.org.
822?
822-7141. Also, just so everybody knows, the Yuba Sutter Soccer League games have been canceled down at the River Bottoms this morning. Too much rain, and there's some localized flooding on the fields, I understand. So all games have been canceled for soccer today.
They had to save money on water wings, right?
That's right.
Okay, we got a minute left, so let's say goodbye, Mike. And
Goodbye,
hey.
Mike.
And next Tuesday, board meeting, homeless, the next iteration of the homeless plan. So if you're interested in listening, learning, or communicating something to the board, I'll see you Tuesday afternoon, 3 p.m.
Cool. So we're ready to go here. This is Andy. This is 1410 AM, The Patriot, 742-5555. If you want to volunteer about cleaning up any of the debris that we have being dumped in our neighborhoods, I don't know who you are, but if I ever catch you, take a picture. We'll fine them $1,000 for littering. Okay, so.